Thank you for joining us on our spiritual journey. Today, we begin a journey or consider a stage that I find really interesting, and it's really common for anybody that's taken just a few steps in their relationship with God. I think you have been through this stage. And the stage is I'm scared of God. So, what is this place? This is a place of trust. This is a place where trust has not been established with God, and that exists for various reasons, right? So, the reasons that you might not trust God and you fear what God might say, include a lack of experience with God. We see this with Moses going up the mountain, the burning bush, right? He hasn't had this experience with God before, and God speaks to him. Moses falls down on the ground. He's absolutely terrified. So sometimes we don't trust God because we don't have a whole lot of experience. We don't have a whole lot of background. Um, we don't see how God has brought us through thing after thing after thing after thing after thing. And so the lack of experience contributes to our lack of trust, and a lack of trust contributes to a fear. Well, what's God going to ask of me? The second reason someone might be in the stage I'm scared of God is feeling hurt by God. Um, my mom died in a car accident, or I tried to grow in my relationship with God and I got hurt, and so there's a feeling of having been hurt by God, and so you don't trust in God, and so I'm scared that God will continue to hurt me. That's a certain mindset a person might have. The third reason a person might be in the stage is the person is truly entering into prayer and is afraid of what God might ask or require. Had a spiritual direction meeting not too long ago, and the person, he was talking about the Our Father, and he says, thy will be done. He's like, I always find that really hard to pray. Thy will be done. Well, what if thy will is the crucifixion? What if thy will is scourging? What if thy will is, your friends leaving you, being, denied? I mean, we look at the life of Christ, he says, Father, let this chalice pass from me, but not my will, but your will be done. And so when we open ourselves up to that, it's an extremely, incredibly vulnerable place. And so we can be really scared. What if God asked me to do something that I can't do or I'm not good at? It's terrifying. What if God asked me to do something that's bigger than me? And my friends, the reality of the fact is that God always asks us to do things that are bigger than us. And so we get terrified by that. And that's a lot of reasons why we don't grow and move forward in our spiritual journey. And so a person might be in the stage, I'm scared of God, because they're truly entering into prayer and they're afraid to ask the question, God, what is it that you want? What is your will for me? Fourth way in which a person could be in this stage, I'm scared of God, is because the person views God as a disciplinarian or a police officer who's out to catch us at doing wrong. So many times it's, the parent that was a disciplinarian, and we bring that image to God. Well, God's got all these commandments, and if I don't do all the right things the right way, then God won't love me. Then God will just punish me, and then God's a God that's out to get me. And so it's another perspective, another way of viewing God. God is someone who's looking to just damn my soul because of some fault or imperfection or whatever it may be. And so it's something for us to consider. And then the fifth way that I've considered is that we doubt that or trust that God has our best intentions in mind, right? I remember when I entered seminary, and I felt certainly a calling by God to become a priest, but I didn't think that God had my best interests in mind. I was afraid of what God was asking me. I was certainly not, I don't think, very enthusiastic, if I'm going to be completely honest, about the vocation because of the sacrifices that are entailed, right? You're in seminary, you can't do all the knuckleheaded things your friends are doing in college. Can't have a wife, can't have kids, can't have grandkids. Life is going to be different. There's going to be a lot of sacrifices that are required. And so I didn't really think that God had my best interests in mind. And it's taken, years for me to see that, in trusting God, God brings me through everything. And the life that I have is much richer than 100 other lives that I could have ever chosen. And so, again, we doubt God's goodness towards us. We don't trust that he has our best interests in mind. We think that God is self-serving, that he's just using us for his own means. And I think those are things that we think. I mean, they're kind of ugly to say out loud, but I mean, if we're going to be truly honest with ourselves, I think a lot of times that's why we're scared of God, because we don't believe He has our best interest in mind. And so, again, the person that is in this stage of I'm scared of God, someone with a traumatic life experience, has had real traumatic experiences with people, has real difficulties trusting, hasn't found a whole lot to be able to put his or her faith in. A person that's at the stage is also maybe at a turning point in their life where they're discerning a vocation, married life, priesthood, religious life, trying to move forward, trying to grow in their relationship with God, and considering, oh, what is God asking of me? And maybe that's something that's bigger than myself. Um, I think a lot of times being at this stage is a real barrier for prayer. A lot of times we don't pray because if I don't ask God, I'm not going to hear an answer. So it's better not to ask, right? Don't ask God. He'll leave me alone. I'm not going to ask him what he wants me to do. I'm comfortable right where I'm at right now. I'll pray my Our Father, our Hail Mary, our Glory Be. I'll go to a daily mass. Might go to adoration and pray a rosary, but I'm certainly not going to have a true conversation with God and God ask, what is your will for me? Um, because it's a terrifying question to ask. One that leads to freedom, one that leads us to our happiness and fulfillment, but one that also requires a tremendous amount of sacrifice. And then there's just people who are raised to see God as a rule enforcer instead of seeing the rules for the sake of having a relationship with God. I think so many times we see the commandments, we see the laws and the rules of the church as, well, just God just wants to enslave us, instead of understanding that rules are for the maintenance of a relationship. A husband and wife, there are rules that you have. You don't sleep around on me. You when you go to the bathroom, you let the toilet seat down. You put your clothes in the hamper. You wash your dishes after you use it. Whatever. So there are rules that we have in order to maintain a relationship, and the commandments are all centered around relationship. And I think so many times we can lose focus on that, and we can forget about that. And so for people who just see the commandments as God having a hand over us or a power play or something like that, yeah, there's that love isn't there. The relationship isn't there. And so there is a fear of God. Well, God's just going to send me to hell. And so something for us to think about is like, what is my next step? If I'm going to be truly honest, I'm scared. I'm scared of God. I'm scared of entering into prayer. I'm scared of a relationship with God. What is God going to think of me? What is God going to say? Indeed, I think that's I hear over and over again the reason why people don't have conversations with priests. It's because they're scared of priests. What is Father going to say to me? What is Father going to think of me? I remember going to confession when I was really little, and Father Wayne Flagg, who's now pastor just down the road in Hill G. Louise, he was my pastor growing up. And you're in a very small parish, Frelsburg, and there's just 4 stop signs there. And you go to confession. Well, Father knows everyone. Father knows everyone's voice, right? And so you confess your sins, and then the thought is, well, what's Father going to think of me? I'm going to be go serve right after this. What does Father think of me? And now that I'm a priest, I get to see the priest perspective and the admiration and the love that priests have for those who come to confession, because it takes a tremendous amount of courage. It takes a tremendous amount of humility to be able to say our sins out loud and to ask for God's pardon. So Satan a lot of times puts lies in our thoughts and our heads. What does God doubt of me? What is God thinking about me? What does the priest think about me? And I think we'd be surprised to consider what God is thinking about you and how much he loves you. And so in our next step, I would encourage you to let's come to the admission and say, God, I don't trust you. Let's just say that out loud and just be completely honest about it. I don't trust God, and that we don't fear the people we trust. And the same is true with God. So I don't fear people that I trust, but I do fear people I don't trust. And that trust is really an area for me to grow within my relationship with God. Another step that we can take outside of the admission is just to take some time to tell God you're scared of him, and then go farther. Pray about why you are scared of him. Why is it that I'm scared of God? Why is it that I'm scared of what he might say? And I think at the root of it, it's because he's going to change our lives. And I don't don't want it to change. I want it to stay the same. And God's going to change our lives for the better. But we think sometimes God's going to change our lives for the worst, and there's going to be things that we're going to have to suffer through. But we remember that Jesus said to Peter, we remember the scene of the disciples being in the boat, being tossed about on the sea and tossed about on the ocean, and they're afraid, they're terrified, and then Jesus comes, walk in the storm, walking on the water. They're terrified. It is a ghost, and they're losing their minds. And what does Jesus say? Be not afraid. It is I. And it is Peter who has the courage to say, Lord, if it is you, ask me to come out upon the waters. And out of that trust, Peter comes and he starts to walk upon the water. But it's when he looks at the storm, he takes his eyes off of Christ. When he starts to trust in himself, he starts to sink and fall. And when he says, Lord, save me, again, trust in the Lord, he doesn't fear. The Lord comes and he saves him. And so it's something for us to think about. Talk to the Lord about that fear. Enter into that and ask the Lord, Lord, help me to trust. Lord, help my unbelief. Also, look up all the Bible passages where it says, be not afraid. Google helps with this, okay? Some sites have said it's like 71 or 72 times in the Bible where it is said, be not afraid, it is I. I don't know if that number is true, but it's a lot that God repeats over and over and over and over again throughout the Old Testament, throughout the New Testament. It is I, do not be afraid. And we really see that it's because of people's fear that it blocks God's ability to bless them, right? So the Israelites, they were fearful. They spoke against Moses. They spoke against the Lord, and they were punished because of their fear. God's not going to provide for us. Moses, you've led us out into the desert to starve to death and to have thirst and to die, and so they rail against Moses because of fear of hunger, or the Egyptian army coming up and about to wipe them out. God opens up the Red Sea. But at Meribah and Massah, where Moses doubted, right? He didn't trust in God. The Israelites got punished and they're running around the desert for 40 years because of fear. They didn't enter into the promised land. Oh my goodness, all these big men, the inhabitants are huge. And the Lord says, I've got you. Enter in and take possession. But they didn't trust. And so they had to turn around and they're running around the desert for 40 years. And so fear is Satan's instrument. God is never one to use fear. But Satan makes us fearful because it blocks the path for us to move forward. And so Jesus says to us today, it is I. Be not afraid. When Jairus, the synagogue official, his daughter's dying, and indeed she had died, unknowing to him, Jesus goes and he goes into the room where the daughter was dead, and he says to Jairus, he says, do not be afraid, just have faith. And that's what the Lord invites us to have faith in place of fear. And it was because of the father's faith that the daughter was saved. And it's the same thing too for us and for our children, that our children are saved and we are saved because of our faith. And finally, ask someone you trust if they have ever been scared of God or nervous to speak to him. I think that's a beautiful conversation to have with people. And if we're truly honest, we see, there are things that truly make us nervous about our relationship with God. And so this stage of I'm scared with God, it's a very complicated one. It's one that's full of a lot of roadblocks that prevent us from moving closer in our relationship with God. But it's certainly a stage in which Jesus continues to speak to us. Be not afraid. So thank you for joining us on our spiritual journey. Next week, we're going to go over a stage, I don't need God, I will decide. Kind of what Adam and Eve said, huh? We kind of being a little impetulant children. Anyway, thank you so much. Have a great weekend, and be not afraid. Trust in the Lord.